Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar series. We have been doing these every Wednesday at 1 p.m. and our goal is to provide value to our patients during these difficult times. We are totally passionate about diabetes. And again, thank you for joining today. You are the rock stars who are playing this game against diabetes, leading this fight against diabetes. We are here to help you through research, through our clinic, through our education system, and so forth. So without much further ado, I will let Courtney take over. And again, please ask your questions and comments. And by the way, we have a big debate this afternoon as well. We are calling this the big cauliflower debate of 2020. And we'll talk about cauliflower at length. Courtney, it's all yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Dr. Bhargava. It's exciting to be here. So I have some canned items here on my table. I have some frozen items that are still in the freezer, but I'll grab those when we're ready to talk about them. But let's start with what I have here on the table. So some of the questions that people have are, can I use canned vegetables? Are they a good replacement for fresh? And the answer is yes, it can be. So the idea behind using vegetables that are nutritionally equivalent to fresh is using ones that have no salt added on the label, like these tomatoes here, as well as these beans over here. If you have a hard time finding vegetables that are no salt added, what you can do is you can actually rinse them before you use them. When you rinse them, you can erase about 50% of the salt that's in that item. So if this can of beans had about, let's say, 500 milligrams of sodium, you'd be able to lower it to about 250 milligrams of sodium. So you would be able to reduce it quite a bit. While it wouldn't be a salt-free or a low-salt item, it would still be less than what it was before. So in most recipes where it calls for fruits and vegetables, it is okay to use canned items if fresh isn't available to you. I also use frozen quite a bit because since I'm not going to the grocery stores often, the frozen will last longer. So I have frozen onions in the freezer. I also have things like frozen peppers, bags of mixed vegetables. So when recipes call for almost any kind of vegetable, I have it available to me, whether it is frozen or canned. Some other things that we can do that's important, especially for people with diabetes, is making sure we're getting enough fiber in our diet. So there are a few different ways that we can do that. One, of course, is by adding beans. They act as a protein, but also as a good fiber source. Beans are extremely high in fiber, which is good. So they have about 8 grams of fiber per serving when we look down here at the label. And that's only 100 calories, which means a good chunk of those calories are coming from fiber. Other things we can do is we can increase the amount of veggies if we're using a recipe. So if we're making, let's say, a soup, which you would just use a broth, add a bag of frozen vegetables, and then whatever seasoning you would like. If it calls for 1 cup of frozen vegetables, you can add 2 cups. Most of the time, you don't have to change how that recipe is cooked, or you won't have to alter any of the other ingredients, because those vegetables are essentially just making the recipe thicker. What you can also do when trying to increase fruits and vegetables is use frozen as well as canned. So we talked about using canned for soups and things, but you can also use the frozen ones as well. And we did mention using frozen in soups. Other things that are important to do for people with diabetes is making sure that you're getting your protein foods. And so I have a peanut butter here because it's a really simple way to add protein to your diet. I also have here a package of tuna. Now, when I choose tuna, I like to choose the ones that are canned or packaged in water, because when we use the ones in oil, it's just adding an unnecessary calorie. And tuna, because it's a fatty fish, already has enough fat in there that's good for us. So we get these ones packed in water, and these are very easy to use. If you want to make a simple tuna salad, or if you want to make a tuna sandwich, you can even use tuna as a topper on salads or other things. And another question that I've got before is, how do I make a quick lunch? So there are some people who are still working who need to go to work every day. So what are some things we can do for a quick lunch? I have tortillas here because these do tend to be lower in carbohydrate than your typical slice of bread. These ones are just yellow corn, and your average slice of bread has around 15 carbohydrates per slice, where these have around 10 carbohydrates per slice. So while it's not necessarily a low carb option, it is lower carb compared to what you may have been eating. And you can use these just like you would bread. So you can still make your sandwiches with it. You can make your quesadillas or pitas or wherever you'd like. You can also use canned soups. So one of the big questions with canned soups is the salt that's in them. And there are actually some soup companies that make light versions of their soup as well as reduced sodium versions. I have here the light version, and this light version has around 300 milligrams of sodium per serving, less than the original version. The problem is that even on this light version, it is still considered a high sodium food. The good news is that Progresso does also make reduced sodium versions, which have even less sodium than the light. It is very difficult to find a sodium-free soup, but there are a few brands that offer reduced sodium or lower in sodium. Progresso is one. There's also the Healthy Choice brand, as well as some of the frozen soups that are merely the broth, the vegetables, and then maybe some source of protein. It's always good to double check ingredients, but if you have questions about label reading, let me know, and we can take a peek at a few of the labels here. The last thing I wanted to point out is because we're at home, we might be reaching towards some more convenience items, which means we might naturally be having a bit extra salt in our foods. So the things that we can do to help reduce some of that sodium are when we season our foods, seasoning it with things like the Mrs. Dash salt-free seasonings. And I have quite a few examples here. Personally, I love using Mrs. Dash because it's got great flavor and it doesn't force me to add any more sodium to those items. You can also, of course, use the no salt add-in. If you're making a broth, there is less sodium. And now they've even started making no salt added broths, which is great, especially for people who are trying to reduce more. The other way we can help lower blood pressure and make sure that we're getting that salt through our system is by getting plenty of fiber. We talked about beans already. Salsa is another one because it's mostly vegetables, the canned vegetables as well. But one thing we haven't talked about is bean-based noodles. And these are a newer product that I find to be very tasty. They're also naturally gluten-free since they're bean-based. And when we look at the nutrition information, we can also see that these are a higher in protein, higher in fiber item, which can really help us regulate our blood sugars, as well as just help our body move some of that sticky fat, sugar, and maybe even some of that salt that sticks around. So when we look at the nutrition label here, we can see that per 3 ounces, which is about 2/3 of a cup of pasta, it has 35 carbohydrates, which is slightly less than our other pastas, but it does have 5 grams of fiber, which is great. Most pastas might have 1 or 2 grams of fiber. Hi, Dr. B has a question. Hi. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Excellent. So this is very, very helpful. Thank you very much. We're receiving a bunch of comments. I want to read some of those to you as well. But first, I want to share my story about soup. So, at work, there's no time. So I was like so excited. I got these soups, all sorts of soups from Costco and elsewhere, and really good soups as well, tasting well, and calories low. So it was like awesome. Turns out I did not look at the salt. Each can had 2 servings, and each serving had 300 milligrams. I was consuming 600 to 800 milligrams of sodium without even knowing about it. And that led to my experience with my doctor. My blood pressure started running high. And I'm happy to report I took all the soups. My pantry at work had 3 dozen soups. So I finished, I gave away, and eventually I have none. And my blood pressure has normalized again. So a personal story that echoes a lot with me. When you talked about rinsing, I said, rinsing great, but I can't really rinse soup. So now there are questions on people's side. One question, is sodium bad for people with diabetes? Sodium is necessary for life, right? It's salt. But on the other hand, many people with diabetes have high blood pressure or are predisposed to high blood pressure. So that's why it's so important to follow your normal sodium diet and really be very careful. I'll let Courtney add to that. Courtney, how should people look at their total sodium intake?
Yes, that is a really good question. Because people with diabetes are at a higher risk for high blood pressure and heart disease, we do encourage people to try to follow about a 2,500 milligrams per day of sodium. And if we look at some of these convenience foods, like we mentioned, we do see that they're going to be higher in sodium. For example, that soup, which we said was lower in sodium than the original, but is still pretty high in sodium. And let's see if I can get this up there. So the first label here shows per serving, and then the second label here shows, whoops, there we go. Everything's backwards, shows per can. So this is actually one of the newer labels. And what's nice about this is that people tend to eat an entire can as one serving. So you can look here, and not have to calculate anything yourself. So it shows us that if we were to eat the whole can, it is over 1,000 milligrams of sodium, which would be almost half our daily total of salt. So like Dr. B said, you can't rinse these, but what you can do is you can moderate the amount of sodium that you get throughout the rest of the day. And that might be using some of those no salt added canned items. It might be rinsing some of the items you have that have salt in them, or when available, using the fresh or frozen items. It is one of the reasons I like frozen so much, because they are nearly equivalent to fresh.
Well, that's a great tip, the frozen. I'm going to try that. Kathy has a question. Do you have any low salt tomato soup recipes? Because canned are still pretty high. So she's specific about salt tomato soup recipes.
Yes. Off the top of my head, I don't have any, but I can definitely get you some. Kathy, if you would like to leave me your contact information, I can reach out to you when I have those recipes and send them your way.
And we will post it on Facebook as well. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Cool.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah.
We do have more questions actually. So we have a question from Brenda, and she's asking, do you have the ability to make your own homemade tomato basil soup? I put in minimal salt in my homemade soup. If you can can your own, can you have it all year round?
Yes, that is a good question. When things are homemade, we have the ability to 100% control what goes into it. And that was actually something I thought of when Dr. B was talking about his problem when he was eating soup for lunch every day. When it's canned, salt is a very cheap preservative, but it also adds flavor to our food. And so that's why we find shelf-stable items are higher in sodium. When we make it ourselves, we have the ability to give it great flavor without having to use salt, because soup does freeze well. Or if someone wants to can it, you can have it all year round. Again, off the top of my head, I don't have any recipes for tomato basil soup, but when you are making it yourself, if the salt is only being used for flavor, which in most items it is, with the exception of baking, you can almost always cut that salt in half or leave it out and taste it first before adding the salt.
Got it.
Great.
Thanks so much. Okay, so I'll keep on interjecting if there are more questions coming up in the middle. I think it's really time to start the cauliflower debate. What do you say, Dr. B?
Okay.
Oh, don't get me started on that. So here's the thing. Just 2 weeks ago, unknown to Courtney and Courtney's hatred for cauliflower, I declared my love for cauliflower right on this webinar. And I really love webinar. So my pantry here has just one thing right here. Rice. Now, being from India, I eat a lot of I eat a lot of rice, and rice does have carbs and calories and all that. And I love this rice cauliflower. Comes in this pouch, microwave, add some Indian lentils and beans on top of it, and it's amazing and fulfilling. So I'm in love with cauliflower. Why would you eat something as good as cauliflower?
Well, I despise cauliflower. I do think it's truly terrible.
Okay, personal.
But I do like broccoli, actually. Even though broccoli and cauliflower are very, very similar, I do love broccoli a lot. And most recipes where it calls for broccoli or cauliflower, I would say the two are fairly interchangeable. So if you were providing me with a recipe that called for cauliflower, I could easily substitute broccoli for that instead. Now, when it comes to the riced version of cauliflower, broccoli and some other vegetables don't always make a good substitute for that. But I will admit that when things are mixed half and half, cauliflower with another vegetable or other spices and seasonings, I don't mind it as much. I feel when cauliflower is on its own, it has a very strong flavor that I don't enjoy. But when it's put into recipes, added with other things, has lots of flavor to it, and then I don't feel like I mind it. I actually did find 2 cauliflower recipes that I think I'm going to try out for my blog. So you can keep tuned for that so you can see what I think.
Well,
And
actually, on that note, we do have a question from Casey, and she's asking, what is your blog called? She'd like to check out your recipe. So if you can just give us a link to your blog, I think we can share it on our Facebook page as well. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, my blog is called Recipes Are Guidelines, and it's just www.recipesarguidelines.com. I'm not a professional chef in any means at all. So this is mostly just a way for me to experience and explore my own cooking abilities with the whole world watching. So there's a few disasters, but there are a few good things too. The new recipe that went up today was actually very good. So that might be one you enjoy trying.
Awesome. So we're going to also put the link for that to our Ayurveda Diabetes page. So I think a lot of our viewers will benefit from it. Yes, Anuj.
Like, I've been trying to say, hey, I have something to tell. The point is, I can't leave cauliflower behind. So Kathy asked, isn't cauliflower a starchy vegetable? So many vegetables have carbs, but when you think of potato versus cauliflower, it's amazingly different. Again, even if you look at this and compare it to rice, this has each cup has 20 calories and 4 grams of carbs. Pretty amazing. Compare it to rice any day. It's amazing. The whole packet has 60 calories and 14 grams of carbs. Just one carb choice in this big thing. So I think you have to understand everything has carbs. Carbs is our macronutrient. It's there. But cauliflower, like pizza crust, that's what we do at home. There are many ways. I call it a superfood, just like broccoli. And nothing against broccoli either. I love broccoli too. So, but I'm excited that Courtney will start making some cauliflower recipes. I think I've done one with them.
Yes, I am going to give it a try. And I do admit, now that you brought it up, I actually like cauliflower crust pizza. But I think it's because it doesn't taste like cauliflower. It has the normal pizza flavors. And so I think that's why I like it. And that does tend to be what I use since it is lower in carbohydrates.
Awesome. Okay, we have one more question for you, Courtney. So Diana is asking us good examples of snacks before, during, or after workouts.
Yes, that's a good question. And while sports nutrition isn't something I spend a lot of time on, when it comes to diabetes, it is something we talk about a lot. And so before the activity, we need to fuel our body with some carbohydrates because that's what gives our muscles the energy to move. After the activity is when we fuel our body with protein because it helps rebuild the muscles and things that we tore down during the activity. So prior to activity, I usually encourage a small carbohydrate containing snack. It does not have to be anything big, and it especially will depend on what your blood sugar is before activity. Maybe around 15 carbohydrates is probably a good starting point. And that can honestly be anything of your choosing. Whole grains, fruits, maybe some vegetables do tend to be good ones because of the fiber that's in them, they're going to last longer. And so you won't feel as famished after a workout. Things like peanut butter, like I have here, that might go well with an apple or on a few crackers. Cheese is a good protein food, but you can pair that with something else with carbohydrates as well. Yogurt has both protein and carbohydrate in it. But then after the workout is when we really want to focus on increasing that protein to help rebuild those muscles. And it does not have to be immediately after a workout, although if you're hungry or if your blood sugar is dropping and you need a snack, you can have it immediately after the workout as well.
Thank you so much.
Courtney, we want to see more things in your pantry and the frozen stuff. Let's bring out the good stuff. And Maria, you can
okay. I'll do the good stuff and then I'll get the good stuff.
Well, thank you for the question that keep coming. While she's bringing that, I want to say a few things. So it's really hard to go to the store and get these vegetables every 2 days. Think about hierarchy of your vegetables from a shelf life standpoint and plan your trips in that way. One other thing that we are doing at our family is we are growing our own vegetables this year. And we do every year, but this time we are doing even more. And my whole family will. So please grow your own vegetables. That's a remarkable thing to do right now. It's a perfect season and it's an amazing activity to do. I
I
will
think
take the question,
for,
Maria. Okay with you?
uh, actually, I was just going to talk about the point you said growing your own vegetables, right? I think with the whole lockdown situation that's happening around, it's also a good activity to sort of put your mind to. So it's a good way to do it. It's not just for your body, but also for your mind in a way.
Could we mute Courtney for a little bit until she's ready?
Yes.
Um, all right.
Yes.
Question from Kim is it okay to stock up on freezer fruits and veggies instead of fresh ones in order to maximize the shelf life? I think it's a reasonable thing to do. That's what we are doing at home. My wife has a plan for how she orders things, and both our fridges are really full right now, frozen and the fridge as well. So definitely, again, when you think of shopping, you can't go as frequently. So tier your veggies and fruits, and then also think freezer, fridge, and in the room sort of approach. It all makes sense. I think Courtney's back to speak, so we'll let her take it away.
Yes. So we'll start with the good stuff, the stuff that's legitimately good for you. And so I have frozen mixed vegetables because I think these go well with almost anything you're making. You can drop them in soup. You can drop them in a casserole. If you're making really anything, these are a good one to add. I also have frozen fruit because I actually just like to eat them like this while they're still frozen because they're a little crunchy and a little sweet, but it also gets me that fruit. Especially raspberries, they go bad very quickly. And if I don't eat them right away, I feel terrible having to throw them away. So I do use frozen fruit a lot. Let's see, frozen. Here's my cauliflower crust pizza. So I do actually use cauliflower in some things. So I've got this one, the veggie version of it, but they also make a very good turkey pepperoni one as well, which I enjoy. Turkey pepperoni has a little spice to it, and so I like that better than regular pork or beef pepperoni. And then
Debate today.
This
All
is
right.
this is for your victory. Yeah, like I put you on
small
screen just because I wanted to see your victory dance, Dr. B.
But then for the fun stuff, like the things that I don't really need, but everybody's got in their freezer, I do have some frozen gluten-free donuts. They haven't been opened yet because I'm saving them for a special occasion. Not quite sure yet what that special occasion is, but I'm sure there will be one where I feel like I need a donut. And then I've also got these. If you can't tell, I have to eat gluten-free. So these are kind of like a little gluten-free snack cake. And so I think these are fun. Also for special occasions, gluten-free food tends to be more expensive. So I do try to save them for special stuff. And then one that's semi-good, semi-not are these little protein bites. They are great for a snack because they're very filling, but they're also very rich. The dark chocolate in them is very rich. And so even though there's only 4 bites in here, I feel like 4 is almost too much. So these are a nice little snack in between meals, after a workout, if you feel like you need it. So that's kind of my, oh wait, and then I have peanut butter crackers too. These are just quick and easy. These are also great for low blood sugar because you can pop a few in your mouth and not have to worry about them. But that's kind of my fun, fresh, frozen, and canned, as well as my super fun, fresh, frozen, and canned.
Well, Courtney, thank you so much for an outstanding job. This is very helpful. I learned a few things about soup, frozen soup. I also learned about, I'm going to try the frozen fruits. In general, I love fruits, but my belief was that, their nutritious value goes down if they're frozen. But I'm more inclined to try it. I see the question about fruit and yogurt, and I'm going to try that. And that's really cool. Have we missed any questions as yet?
We haven't missed any questions, but we do have a few people who are just saying hello to you. So we have Wendy Sue wants to say hello, and we also have Karen.
Hey, Karen, you are
Casey said,
next on. One of these Wednesdays, we are going to get you into this debate as well. So stay tuned. I'll be reaching out to you. You are on the list, actually. So I'm glad. There's a question
okay,
from Kathy. Maria, go ahead.
just give me a minute. Kathy wants to know what is a good amount of protein per meal to eat?
That's a really good question. And that is, I do try to usually individualize recommendations because it's going to depend a lot on your activity, your lifestyle, how old you are, your age, and all that. But a general recommendation would probably be somewhere around 25 grams of protein to 30 grams of protein per meal. And then maybe another 5 grams of protein per snack if you feel you need the snacks. We do need protein throughout the day, of course, for muscles, for tissue, for brain health, for all of that. But we don't need quite as much as some people would like us to believe. But there isn't necessarily a problem with having a high protein diet. It's more, how do the calories balance? We just want to make sure we're not getting more nutrients than our body needs, because then those extra calories just get stored as fat and it's harder for our body to use that.
Okay, awesome. We have one more question from Diana. She wants to know, is sucralose a good sweetener to use?
Yes, and I somewhere here, not sure where it went, had a box of sucralose, which is more commonly known as Splenda. I personally am fine with artificial sweeteners. Artificial sweeteners have no calories. They do tend to be man-made or artificially made, so they're not necessarily a natural source of sweetening, but for people with diabetes, they are a great way to help reduce or lower carbohydrate intake, while also getting the sweetness in those foods that you enjoy. So I am okay with artificial sweeteners, but that can be a personal preference. Yeah, Dr. B.
We have found so for our next debate, the topic will be artificial sweeteners. I also have some opinions. In the interest of time, I will not. In general, my point is you got to minimize artificial sweeteners. There are some better than the other. We will bring that topic as a debate topic one of these times as well.
All right.
If you're using them, keep using the sucralose, and that's fine. But at some point, we'll talk about this more. Jamie, I'm sure, has an opinion on it too. So in fact, Jamie, if you want to send people an article, that would be great. Hello, Jamie.
Look for the article I wrote on that last July. So I'll link that.
Okay, cool. Jamie, our speaker for next week, she's going to talk about the topic of, Maria, what's our topic next week?
Our topic next week is medication.
Great conversation here. I learned a lot, Courtney. Thank you for joining. I have
You're
some
welcome.
videos you can do. I would like everyone to think about 2 things that they can do immediately based on what Courtney taught us today. It's just very important. Being educated is one piece of it. Putting it into action is another. And I think I failed miserably at putting it into action. I would urge all of you to think about what 2 things you will do differently based on our conversation today. It has been a great conversation. Thank you for everyone who put in their questions. Please spread the word about these. Again, our goal is to provide value. If you know there are questions or topics you want, put them on Facebook. If you want a speaker coming in, we will definitely do that. Karen, you'll be glad you joined, because I'll get you into one of these in the next few weeks. We have a quarterly scheme where we go through different topics, and we just cover about everything in diabetes in these. So we will see you next time. Courtney, your key take-home messages. Just maybe reinforce 2 or 3 things you want people to remember from your presentation today.
In times like this, especially where things are very unusual and we're not getting out as often, frozen and canned are okay. So don't feel like you have to shun them or go without fruits and vegetables in the name of trying to be healthier.
Well, thank you, everyone. We will see you next Wednesday at 1 p.m. And Maria, are you ready to release the title of our next
Yes.
presentation?
The title for our next Facebook Live is Medications on a Budget. So we think you're going to really like this next session as well. Jamie is going to be taking us through it, and we're really excited. So we hope all of you join us in the next week's session.
And Jamie does this on a daily basis. As a pharmacist embedded in our clinics, she actually helps the patient with medications. So you are really hearing from an expert. We look forward to seeing you all. There will be a bunch of tips and money saving that day. Everybody take care.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.